Hey guys, welcome to this video. This is an interesting man that I met here in Chiang Mai called Lateef, and he's going to tell us a little about his quite remarkable and interesting life, some of the things that he's been through. And so stay tuned, he's got some really good stuff here that we're going to hear about. You want to say something, Lateef?
Yeah, my name is Lateef Fahari. I was born in Cleveland, Ohio, USA. And just in terms of my credentials, I'd like to just let you know that I have a Bachelor of Science in Black Studies. We call that a BS in BS. I have a master's degree in management from Golden Gate University. I have been a licensed high school teacher in Ohio. I've taught computer programming at a business school in Ohio. I also have been a real estate agent licensed in the state of Ohio, and I've been an insurance agent in the state of Ohio. I've been a high school teacher. I spent a lot of time working in the U.S. government, over 20 years. I managed to reach the rank of GS-13, which is roughly equivalent to a lieutenant colonel.
Wow.
I've lived in 6 countries, and I've supervised foreign nationals in at least 4 or 5 countries. So I just wanted to take opportunity to get a few things off my mind that I've been thinking about over the years. The first thing I want to tell you about is something called the talk. There's been a number of recorded police shootings of black men, particularly fleeing in the United States. And I sit in bars and restaurants around the world, and white people are often asking me about why are these black men running away? And why are all these black people getting shot in America?
Okay.
What's going on? What I want you to know is that this is nothing new. Black people have always known that the white policemen killed us, abused us at a much higher percentage than whites. The only difference is this camera that I'm looking in right now, that's on a cell phone. It's only because people are recording these incidences that white people are beginning to see the frequency of these incidences. Now, I grew up in the black ghetto of Cleveland, Ohio. I was there during the riots and the shooting of Martin Luther King and all of that. I went to one of the roughest junior high schools in the country, and my principal, whose name is Mr. Smith, I forget his first name, he was plucked out of that junior high school because he reformed it. And he was pulled out of there by President Lyndon Johnson and brought to Washington to work in the Department of Health, Education, and Welfare. And he was a black principal. Now, after he got to Washington, a year or so later, he pulled out my English teacher, who was a white man, and brought him to Washington, D.C. to work with him. And before I graduated from junior high school, I was contacted by this English teacher who told me that they wanted to offer me an interracial high school scholarship to a predominantly white school in the suburbs. And of course, I accepted it. And I had to take 2 buses in order to get from my home in the ghetto to this suburban white Lutheran high school. I had to go there for an interview before I would be accepted. After the interview, I came out to the bus stop to go home, and there was an old white lady standing in the bus stop. I say old because she was probably about 60 and I was about 16. She looked at me and she walked out of the bus stop and went walking down the street. After the bus came and I got on, at the next stop, I noticed that that little old white lady got on the bus. And I was confused. I wondered why. So when I got home, I told this story to my parents, and they said, basically, sit down, son, let's talk. And that was when, for the first time, my parents explained to me what the attitude of whites were toward black males, and basically how to survive contact with white people, how to stay out of trouble and get back home. And that has become known as the talk in media. That's when I got to talk. So I spent 2 years at Lutheran High School East. Met a kid named Bill Van Aken, who was in class with me, a number of classes. He was a young, white, popular jock. He was an athlete. And he was basically known for, he ran on the track team and basketball and whatnot, but not necessarily a strong academic type. And one day, I just mentioned to him, I said, Bill, I noticed that the name of the street that this school is built on is Van Aken Boulevard. You know anything about that? And he said, yeah, that was my grandfather. So, I'm sitting next to Bill Van Aken.
Wow.
So anyway, I spent 2 years at Lutheran High School East, and then I decided that I wanted to actually go back to the ghetto and to the high school, Glenville High School, which is in the Glenville neighborhood, because they had a program in television production that I was interested in participating in. And so I performed Bob Ardike, the person that had gotten me the interracial high school scholarship, that I wanted to give up that scholarship and basically go back to the ghetto, which is pretty strange, but that's why I did it. And I did it, and 6 months or so after I was there, he called me again, and he said, well, Lateef, we have another program that I think that you might be interested in.
Cool.
It's connected with St. Ignatius High School. It's called the Cleveland Urban Learning Community. It's a school without walls. And we think you'd be a perfect candidate, and you can also develop your television production program there. So
Sweet.
I said, okay, Bob, that's great. So so I went and I participated in that. There were only 90 students. I was only there for 1 year, my junior year, and I figured out that I had enough classes accumulated that I actually could graduate mathematically. And so I went to the directors of the school. They talked to the principals at Lutheran High School West. No, St. Ignatius West, St. Ignatius High School, and asked if they would allow me to graduate early. And they said, well, if he's going to go to college from here, we'll let him graduate. And so I graduated without ever being a senior in high school, and I went to Cuyahoga Community College, where I spent 2 years. And then I transferred to Ohio University. And it was at Ohio University where I met Arsenio Hall.
Oh.
I was just sitting, I don't know where I ran into him at, but somewhere on campus. Again, that college had about 18,000 students, but only about 400 black students. And because of that and the nature of the society at the time, black people always spoke to each other when we ran into each other. Hey brother, how you doing? How you doing, sister?
Yeah.
And somehow I ran into Arsenio, and it turned out that we were from the same neighborhood,
Wow.
basically in Cleveland. Actually, I'm from Cleveland. I grew up in the city limits of Cleveland, and I believe that he grew up in Warrensville Heights, which is a suburb of Cleveland. But I knew him well enough that when I would be just sitting in the cafeteria at lunchtime or whatever, and he happened to walk in, he would see me, he'd come over and talk. And we would talk about the neighborhood, and he always talked about this woman, this young girl that I think her name was Velma Hart, that he considered to have been the most beautiful woman that he had ever met. And he just loved Velma Hart. I remember that. But he used to tell a lot of jokes and talk a lot of trash. I never knew or thought that he might become a famous comedian or a movie star. Whenever I saw Arsenio, he was either on the basketball court or sitting on a wall looking at the girls outside, but I don't think I ever saw him with a book. And I always wondered about that. You know, what's he doing here? What is this guy about? And I think it turns out that he was a theater major, but I didn't really know that at the time. And so time went by. I spent 2 years at Lutheran High at Ohio University, where I met Arsenio. I got married my last week at Ohio University.
Cool.
And then I went back off to Cleveland to look for employment. Then one day I was standing in my parents' living room with my back to the television, and I heard a familiar voice. And I turned around and I looked, and it was Arsenio in the television. He was doing I think it was a summer special. During that time, you had a season of a TV show, and then in the summertime, on the summer break, they put a replacement show in, and there was an Arsenio Hall show, and that's when I first saw him again. Then later, he became a late night talk show host and did a lot of other things. I didn't really pay attention to him again until I saw him in. I used to watch his TV show, and then I saw him in Coming to America, and they had a fight scene in there. I think he was mopping in a like a fake McDonald's restaurant or something, and he breaks. I think he breaks the mop stick, and he gets into a fight with someone. And it reminded me of the fact that during my time our time at Ohio University, Arsenio was in the Bando class, which is I believe it's a South Vietnamese martial arts style, and I was in the karate school, the karate club.
Right.
And the guys from the Bando class were always trying to get the guys from the karate class to come up and spar with them because they thought that they could beat our asses. So, but I never went. so that was sort of Arsenio. I graduated from Ohio University, and then I got a phone call unexpectedly. And I turned around. Well, actually, before that, I heard another voice on the television that I recognized in another house. And I turned around and looked at the television, and it was President Carter, I believe. And standing next to him was a face I recognized, and it was Mr. Smith, the principal of the junior high school that I had attended, who was working at HEW. So I'm like, wow, okay.
Yeah.
So then a little later, the phone rings. Not the same day, but a little later, phone rings, and the guy on the end says, Lateef, this is Bob. It was Bob Ardite, the guy that had gotten me the interracial high school scholarship and out of the ghetto, and eventually then allowing me to get to Ohio University. And he says, Lateef, Mr. Smith and I have heard that you graduated from college, and we got another program for you. They said, we are going to attach you to a federal program, another affirmative action type program, that you will teach at a public school in Cleveland, and in the evening time, you will take master's degree courses, and you will receive a master's degree in education, and we will guarantee you a job for at least 2 years after you complete the program.
Right.
And I said, okay, fantastic, Bob. I'd like to do that. And they paid for all of my classes, and I received a stipend, and they paid for all my master's degree courses. It should have been a wonderful thing. But again, I had to abandon the program. My wife had gotten pregnant, and the stipend wasn't enough for me to be able to support myself, the family, and for 2 years to complete it. And so what I did was I applied for a job teaching in a high school in Cleveland Heights, University Heights, which again is predominantly white, upper middle class type high school community, a lot of doctor and lawyers kids, predominantly white. I think there were only about 40 black students in the school, and I think they only had 4 black instructors in the school.
Wow.
Again, but what happened was, when I applied for this job, I had put Bob Ardike's name on the application for recommendation, not thinking that there was any drama about that. But what happens is the department chairman notices his name, knew Bob Ardike, who was in Washington, D.C., and he calls him for a reference. And this is when Bob Ardike finds out that I was attempting to abandon the ship. I was going to leave the federal program and go teach in a high school. So I'm teaching elementary school in Cleveland, Ohio, in one of the ghetto schools, and a knock on the door, and the principal's secretary comes in, and she says, "There's a call for you from the Department of Education in Washington, D.C., and the principal says you can take it in her office." And I'm like, oh my, what does that mean? I don't know anyone. So I go down and I pick up the phone and I say hello, and the other voice on the other side says, "Lateef, this is Bob." And Mr. Smith and I hear that you are attempting to get a job working in a high school, and you want to leave our program. And I'm shocked that he even knows about this.
Yeah, because you said before that he was like, it was almost like they had tabs on you all the time, right?
Well, it seems that they did, because they kept finding me.
Yeah.
You know, they knew when I graduated from high school. They knew when I graduated from the university.
Obviously, this is day of way before internet and all that kind of thing where
and I just keep getting these phone calls, and they're in Washington, D.C., and I haven't seen him, since he left Cleveland. Just really an amazing thing. So I explained the circumstance to him, and then he said to me, "Okay, Lateef, if you want to do this, and you have to make the decision right now, because I know that if I tell Mr. Smith about this, he's going to say, you decide whether you want to stay with us or go with them."
Mm-hmm.
And I said, "Well, Bob, I think I really need to take this job if they will give it to me," because they still hadn't given me the job. Wow. And so then he goes, "Okay, Lateef, I'll make the phone call to Stan Lasky and I'll recommend you for the job. But I want you to understand that Mr. Smith nor I will never intercede on your behalf again." And I'm like, "Oh, okay." I think I stepped in it, but it's too late. I don't know, did you want to pause or do something?
Well, I was just going to ask you why you carry the U.S. Constitution in your shirt pocket right there.
Yes. I carry this Constitution around because constantly, I've lived outside the United States. I'm 70 years old now, and I've lived outside the U.S. for most of the past 50 years, really. And like I said, I've lived in 6 different countries, worked in a lot of different offices for the U.S. government, and white people seem to view me as a representative of America. So no matter where I go, they are always asking me or wanting to tell me their opinion about things that are going on in the United States. And so I make an attempt to explain to them answers to their questions. They want to make statements like, "Why do you all have all those guns in America? You have over 300 million guns and you're having all of these shootings. Why don't you get rid of those guns? And then I attempt to explain to them that the reason why America can't just get rid of the guns like they did maybe in Australia or other places is our Constitution gives the right to citizens to own and bear arms. And so you just can't take them away, basically, without a constitutional amendment. There are many other issues that America faces that are controlled really or limited in what you can do about them by the Constitution itself. Why is it there are not enough women in our Congress and what have you? I try to explain to people that the American Constitution was written by white landowners, the people who controlled the means of production in the United States. And no one was basically allowed to vote unless they were landowners. And that our government, our two houses, are set up basically for the aristocrats and the landowners, the people that own and control the means of production in America, to hold the elective offices. And that is why, most people do not know, even Americans, that the US citizens do not elect their president by popular vote. The president is elected by the Electoral College. So Donald Trump, for example, did not win the popular vote. Hillary Clinton won more votes than Donald Trump did, but because of their ability to manipulate the Electoral College, he was able to become the president. So many of the problems that we have in America cannot be resolved, and I tell people that America now is on a slow burn toward a second American Civil War, because whites in another 20 years will no longer be the majority population in the United States, and they are already losing their ability to win national offices. And so you have the rise of white nationalism in America, and basically we cannot solve the problems of America unless probably we have another revolution that actually rewrites this Constitution. But most of the problems can be explained by the Constitution.
Okay.
That's why.
Cool. Now, before we came up here, we were chatting in my room, and you mentioned something about your mother and the story with thinking that like all whites were Jews or Jews were whites or something like that.
Oh, yeah. In the neighborhood that I grew up in, most of the small businesses were owned by Jews. Most of the Anglo-Saxon whites that had, been in America for generations, the Catholics and Protestants had elevated themselves, and they no longer really wanted to own businesses in the poor black communities. And so a lot of the little grocery stores, hardware stores, appliance stores, repair your lawnmower, your vacuum cleaner, these were owned and run by Jews. Well, my mother, my aunts and uncles, they would always tell us kids, go around the corner and buy me a pack of cigarettes from that Jew. I need some onions. Go around to that Jew and get me a pound of onions. And so in our minds, all white people were Jews because those were the only white people that we came in contact with. And one time when I went around the corner to buy something for my parents, and I was maybe only around 7 years old, there was this crowd around the door of this store. Now, the The husband of it was a husband and wife owner. The husband actually was a Cleveland policeman, and there was a crowd around the door, and I couldn't get in. And I'm standing there, and I'm looking. I'm trying to figure out what's going on. Then the door cracks open, and the female owner of the store, she looks at me, and she grabs me by the arm, and she drags me into the store, and then she points, and she said, "Do you know him?" And there's a black man laying on the floor bleeding.
Oh,
He had apparently attempted to rob the store,
wow.
and the owner, off-duty policeman, shot him. And he was laying there. He was still alive. You know, he's breathing. You know, and I'm a little kid, and I'm looking at him, and I'm going, "No, I don't know who he
It's
is."
been quite traumatic.
Yeah, and then she just kind of grabs me and pushes me out.
Skedaddle him.
Back out the door, you know, outside, you know. And again, I go home and I tell my parents, you know, what's going on. But that was why I didn't know that all whites weren't Jews until I went to a Lutheran high school on a scholarship, and I didn't even know what a Lutheran was, you know, until I got there.
No, that's a great story. So the other thing that when we was chatting in the bar the other day, one of the intriguing stories was the Saturday interview with the CIA thingamajig. Do you remember that?
Yeah. After I finished the university and I had my high school experience, I moved around. I sold real estate. I sold life insurance. And I was getting older, moving more toward 30, and I wanted to travel, and I didn't have the money to see the world, so I was trying to figure out how to do that. The first thing I did was I joined the Air Force for a couple of years, which is another whole story, and I ended up being dismissed from the Air Force early because I have something called dyslexia.
Okay.
And dyslexia is a disorder, a neurological disorder where you reverse letters and numbers. You normally have difficulty reading. You also can have problems learning foreign languages and that type of thing. And the job that they gave me in the Air Force was I was a forward air controller. I told airplanes where to drop bombs on people and kill them. And I had to read a map and pick out the targets. And I actually had to write a petition to Air Force headquarters to release me because I told them I'm a danger in this job. You need to let me out. And they let me out. So then where did I go? I went on while in the Air Force. I took a 5-country tour of Africa.
Wow.
And while I was on this 5-country tour of Africa, I met this woman named Wilma Combs. She's probably dead now. She worked for the federal government, Small Business Administration, I believe, as a contracting officer. And I was explaining to her that I was trying to get a job with the federal government, that I had written an application to the CIA and asked if I could get an interview, and actually that the CIA actually wrote me back. And they had said that they wanted me to contact them for an interview. And it scared me. I believe it had a phone number there for me to call them on. But I never called them because I thought about it and I said, well, you know, why would the CIA hire a black man? And I think in the worst way, they just want to send me to Africa and be a spy against black people, and I don't think I really want to do that.
Yeah.
So I didn't answer the call. But since then, I have had numerous contact with special forces and intelligence type organizations. One of the things that happened, I was working for the Department of the Navy as a contracting officer. I got a phone call and I was asked to come for an interview with the Army Intelligence Command. And I had been on a couple of other job interviews that week, and I didn't feel that I could be away from my desk in the next week or two, that I'd have some problems with my current employer. So I basically said I didn't want to come for the interview. And then strangely, I thought it was over, and the lady said, well, wait a minute, let me talk to my supervisor. And she went away from the phone, she came back, and she says, my supervisor says that if you're willing to come in on Saturday, we'll interview you then.
Okay.
So I'm like, okay. I mean, how can I refuse now? You know, so I got in my car and I drove from Bayonne, New Jersey down to Washington, D.C. For this interview. And I walk in and there's at least 4 people sitting around the table waiting to talk to me. So I thought, you know, that's kind of strange. Usually it's only 1 or 2 people, you know. And so we go through this interview, I answer some questions and what have you, and then at the end of it, and then they explained to me, they said, well, if we give you this job, we can't tell you what you're gonna be doing until after you're on the job. And this job requires a top secret clearance. And I'm like, oh, okay. And then they say, you're currently a GS 9, I believe I was at the time, which is equivalent to like a captain, I think. And they said, what we would want you to do if we were to hire you is agree not to, they said it would take a year to do the background investigation, and that I'd have to promise not to take another job until the investigation was completed.
Yeah.
And at that point, the person that would have been my supervisor said, can I talk to you out in the hallway? So we got in the hallway and she says, well, we want to offer you this job, but it is going to take a year approximately to do this background investigation. And we want you to promise that you will not take another job in the next year, but we want to bring you in at your current rank, although you would be eligible for a GS11 position. So
Okay.
they want me to not accept a GS11 job somewhere else for a year, and then come to them if I pass the background investigation as a GS9.
Wow, that's a bit backwards, isn't it?
Well, I thought so, and in the end, I said, no, I'm just not willing to do that. And so I didn't get that position, but I then ended up getting a job going from the Department of the Navy in Bayonne, New Jersey. I went down to Norfolk, Virginia. I did ship repair contracting down there, and I also ended up supervising a contract that followed Russian submarines around the Atlantic Ocean.
Wow.
And I think I had 8 vessels that I was responsible for, and they had something called an array. They dropped it down into the ocean and they pulled them on what was a converted tugboat platform, and they had electronics in it that they could find and track Russian submarines down there. So I was a supervisor of this contract. And there's a lot of other stories that went with that. But I had a problem that in one of the contracts that I was supervising, it was a new vessel that was being fitted, and we had contractors in there preparing the vessel. Within the contract, there was a statement that there was a room that had to be completed by a date certain, and that once completed, no one could go back into that room. The contractors couldn't go in that space. I couldn't go in that space. But Motorola was going to come in and install top secret equipment.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, the contractor did not finish that room by that date certain. Within the contract, there was a clause in there that said that we could take liquidated damages. It's a fine per day against that contractor for every day that they hadn't completed that room. Because now I got Motorola staff with their equipment sitting on the deck of the ship, and they can't do their work. They can't get in there. So So I start executing these liquidated damages. I'm sending these notices, faxing them in to the contractor, says I'm fining you, you're not finished, you didn't finish the job on time, blah, 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 blah. And then all of a sudden my phone blows up, and then all of a sudden they start flying people in to see what I'm doing. And I'm like, what the hell? You know, it's just a job. I got a contract, and I'm just doing what the contract says. And so one of the guys that comes in is an engineer named Bob. And I asked him, I said, Bob, what's going on? You know, why is everybody all excited? I'm just doing what the contract said. And he looked at me and he says, nobody's ever done that before. So, and they want to know what you're doing. So, well, I got no choice. So again, I'm coming in contact, with secret situations.
Yeah.
Then I'm also looking at these ships that I'm writing these different repair vessel contracts on. I did the USS Humphreys. The hospital ships that you see that go to the disaster areas from the Military Sealift Command. I used to administer contracts to repair those vessels, so I still see them selling. But I noticed that there was some distinction between some of those vessels, which I would not, I got curious as to why they were numbered in the way that they were. And I attempted to ask some questions about what's the difference between these ships, and no one would really tell me. And then when I had to repair one, and they did not tell me when I could have the ship to repair it, and I went down and tried to talk to them, they were very mysterious about it, and they wouldn't tell me what dates I could have it, and at one point I just said, well, look, I can't fix it if you don't tell me when I can have it, and I don't care where the ship is now. And I don't care where the ship is going to go after I get it fixed. But you got to tell me when I can have it. And then they're like, well, who are you? And then I explained to them I'm the contracting officer, blah, blah, blah. And eventually, this lieutenant colonel type, I think, lieutenant commander, I think she was, commander, she intervenes and talks to me. And then finally, they give me the sign off. They tell me the dates I can have it. And, then after I got to sail on a couple of these ships during the repair process, and eventually I figured out, what was going on, with some of this stuff. These ships were involved in some top secret stuff.
Yeah.
So I keep getting in these top secret situations. So when I get offered a job with the Department of the Army, I leave the Department of the Navy, and I go to Italy with the Department of the Army. And then after I get there, I get called by the intelligence officer on the phone, and they said, you have to this time, I gotta talk to you. I go over there, and then he tells me, you're not supposed to have this job.
What?
This job requires a top secret clearance, and you don't have one.
Wow.
Blah, 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 blah. He's just going nuts, yelling at me and acting a fool, and I'm like, look, I applied for a job and they gave it to me.
Yeah.
The job description, and I had the job description with me. I said, here's the job description. It does not require me to have a top secret clearance. So they said, well, you got to have one or we're going to send you home. And so I had to fill out all of the paperwork and stuff that I would have had to fill out with, these other people back there with the Army Intelligence Command. So I ended up getting this top secret clearance anyway. And now we hear them talking on television about skiffs, going to skiffs to be able, to look at top secret information. Donald Trump's got this stuff in Mar-a-Lago, and you're not supposed to view it unless you have a skiff. Now, the skiff is just a room that has electronic equipment to make sure that you don't bring anything electronic in.
Yeah.
You can't photograph anything, and you can't take anything out. Okay, so you get the document, you get signed in, you look at it, and you can't take your phone or anything in, and then you go out. My boss in Italy sent me over to the skiff to read a top secret clearance document, which is really funny. I go because he didn't want to go, and they give me the wrong document. They gave me someone else's top secret document. It's just like watching television, TV series or something. So I read it. They gave it to me, so I read it. And then I gave it back to them because I had to get the one I was supposed to read. And then I read that, and I go back, and then I tell my boss the story. And then he's like, well, why did you give it back to them? I like to read stuff like that. I would have went over there and read. I said, look, you sent me to read something. I couldn't read it unless I gave them that one back. So, you can't do it. So, so I just, kept running into it. One time I got another phone call. They wanted me to buy something. It came across my desk. And I had to approve everything that got purchased in the office. Well, I looked at the purchase request. It was to buy something that our office was not supposed to buy, and I was supposed to send it somewhere that we did not service. My office did not service. So I kept returning the document, the purchase request, to the sender. And after I returned it twice, I got another phone call, but it wasn't Bob. It was some special forces operation. So some guy says, what's your rank? Says, what's your rank? What's your security clearance? What's your name? What's your rank? What's your security clearance? So I said, well, my name's Lateef Fahari, you know that. And says, my rank is GS9. And actually, I was a GS11 at that point, I think. So I'm a GS11, and my security clearance is top secret. I had a top secret clearance because they had made me get it.
Yeah.
So then he goes, do you have a crypto telephone? And I said, no. I don't
Cryptographic telephone,
right? I don't have a cryptographic telephone.
Not crypto as we understand crypto these days.
Yeah, not that kind of cryptographic telephone, yeah. So I said, no, I don't have one. Although my boss did have one in his office, but I didn't think to tell him that. And then he says, we'll be over to see you. So they made an appointment, and then we had a meeting with my boss. They told us a story about where it was going and what it was for and blah, blah, blah. And, at the end of the conversation, my boss told me to go ahead and send it to the buy floor. Go ahead and let them buy it. But to this day, I do not believe that was going where they, for the purpose and, whatnot. But I thought it was a cover story.
Wow, well, that's another great story. So we're going to have to wrap it up in sort of 5-10 minutes time. And we'll go and have a beer down at the bar down the road here where I met you.
Yeah.
But tell us about Hell's Kitchen, because you said you used to have a restaurant which you believe was the first Hell's Kitchen. Obviously, Gordon Ramsay's done all that since that Hell's Kitchen thing. But you say it's something to do with. Tell us a story about it. Something to do with an area. Was it in New York?
Yeah, it's an area in New York. I graduated from Ohio University, and at that time, like I said, there were only about 400 black students down there at that time. And we were always saying, we wish we had some barbecue.
Okay.
We like some barbecue. There were no barbecue restaurants at Ohio University at the time. They had a lot of sub shops and, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And so after I graduated and done a lot of the other stuff that I've been talking about in Cleveland, I decided, I was actually teaching, seminars in the history department at Cuyahoga Community College. I got a job teaching in the history department. And another story in connection with that is I was sitting in the seminar room waiting for some students to arrive, some college students, to run a seminar, and I hear this screaming in the outer office, help, help. And I'm like, what the hell? And I know that the only person out in that outer office is a little old white lady. I'm always dealing with these little old white ladies. So I go out to see what she's yelling about, and there is a student with long hair, and he's holding on to the doorknob to go to the exit to the office. Alongside of the door was a glass wall. Okay, so I could see through the glass wall that it looked like there was about 50 people trying to get in the office, and it looked like they were trying to get at this guy that was holding on to the doorknob. The door was open about, yay much. And it seems like, I thought that he was trying to pull the doorknob, and it was one of those doors that you could push a button, sort of on the inside of the door, and it would cause it the outside to lock. And for unknown reason, it's not logical, but I thought that I could close that door and he couldn't. So I went up and I just sort of grabbed him by the shoulders and slung him aside, grabbed the doorknob, pushed the button, and I was able to pull the door closed. When I turned around, this student was holding a big kitchen knife on me. And he was just standing there, and he had these glossy eyes, and his eyes were shifting from me to the door, from me to the door. And at that time, I was into the karate class and everything. So somehow, I'm in this karate stance, and I'm faced off on this guy with a kitchen knife, and I got combat boots on. Because that was my thing. I wore combat boots and blue jeans at the time. So I'm thinking, I guess, I can kick the knife. I got combat boots, and who knows what's going on? It happens like this. But I looked at his eyes, and he kept me to the door, me to the door. So I said, "Do you want to go back out there?" And he nodded his head like this. And I said, okay. And I slid to the side, and I'm like, he'll be aside. Go ahead. And he went out. I locked him out, locked him outside, so he couldn't get back in. And then me and the secretary, we stood at the glass wall, and we were watching the action outside. And it was like having the TV on, with the volume turned down, because you couldn't really hear what was going on. But it was like 50 students. They were fighting. There was two groups of students. They were fighting each other out there. And then I saw this old guy, who probably was like 55 or so. He had gray hair, but he walked, he's really heavy set. He walked right into the middle of one of the groups, up to what looked like the leader of that group. And he just, bam, hit the guy. And the student just crumbled to the floor. Wow. And then around that time, the security guards start running in, and, and they clean everything up. What I found out was that this occurred when Anwar Sadat went to Israel. And it was students that favored Anwar Sadat versus students, there was two Arab groups that were fighting each other, and it was the Arab group that didn't think that Anwar Sadat should have gone to Israel. So that was what that was about. I think I strayed off the point that you asked me about, though.
No, that was it, Well, Hell's Kitchen.
Yeah. So during that same time, I decided to open up a restaurant, a barbecue restaurant, at Ohio University, where I had graduated, which was about probably about 150 miles south of Cleveland. Somebody will say I'm wrong about the distance, but I would have to drive down there with my ribs and my other things, and I would open up the restaurant. I would go down on Wednesday nights, and I would open the restaurant up Thursday, Friday, and Saturdays. I sold barbecue with my grandmother's recipe for the barbecue sauce. But while I was studying history, I had somehow read about an incident, police incident that had occurred in New York City. And it was in a neighborhood, and there was it was a shooting incident. A lot of cops came in, and one of the cops said, "This place is Hell's Kitchen." And the neighborhood from then on became known as Hell's Kitchen by the police. They referred to it that way. People in the neighborhood started referring to it as Hell's Kitchen, and that's how I understand the neighborhood got the name Hell's Kitchen. So when I decided to open up a restaurant at Ohio University in about 1977, I named my restaurant Hell's Kitchen.
Awesome.
And that predates Gordon Ramsay. And so when I moved to Thailand and I decided to open up another barbecue restaurant, I named my restaurant Hell's Kitchen, Afro-American style barbecue.
Awesome, awesome. So you got to chase old Gordon up for the royalties, really, I think.
Well, that's just another whole story. I licensed the name Hell's Kitchen Barbecue in Thailand, and a license was good for, I think, 4 years or 6 years, I forget which it was. But when it got time for me to renew my license, and I went to the city hall here in Chiang Mai to do that, they told me that I could not renew my license because someone else had it.
What?
Someone stole my name.
Jesus.
You know, this is Thailand, so somebody paid under the table and got my name. And when I explained that to them, you know, they told me that I had to sue the guy. They would take no action.
I mean, you reckon it was Gordon Ramsay?
No, hell no. But they did the same thing with the Playboy Club. You know, down on Lloyd Crow, there used to be a Playboy Club.
Lloyd Crow, just to quickly explain, Lloyd Crow is one of the main sort of roads in Chiang Mai with all the bars and the bar girls. It's like all the nightlife is located around that area. Most of
Yes.
Most of the seedy stuff, anyway.
Right. Yeah. That's the Barley Girl area. It's gone down a lot since then. But I just mentioned it because there was a patent problem. It wasn't a legitimate franchise, and then I think it was Playboy. They came in and tried to sue them, and the Thai government would not force them to change the name of that store.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Now, let's close it out with a question on what's in the sort of immediate future for you. I know you said the other day you might be going back to America.
Yes. Well, I came here at age 52 when and most of the guys I ran around with were 55, 60 years old.
And I've got some pics as well that I'll put on the end, folks. So make sure you stick around till the end. I'll put some pics of Lateef when he was a younger man and he's looking quite.
Had black hair.
Well, that's why when I first spoke to him, I said, "Well, you look like Arsenio Hall." And he said, "I've met Arsenio Hall," and that's what get the whole conversation going.
Yeah. That's how we met. But what was I saying? With the Hell's Kitchen.
No, about like what you're gonna do.
Oh, what I'm gonna do next. The guys were older, and what I found was that when they started getting around 70 years old, if they were still alive, they started going back to their home countries, back to England, back to Canada, back to the United States.
For the Medicare.
For the medical care. You can fall off of your bike, your motorbike here, you know, at 20 or 30 years old and break your arm or leg, and you can pay for your hospital needs. But
maybe recover quickly.
You start having heart attacks and strokes, and you need transfusions and, you know, cancer treatment and all that kind of stuff. Then they need to go back home where they could get free medical care. So then my mother and father were also going down with Alzheimer's, cancers, and what have you, and my sister needed some help with them. So after basically 20 years, I decided that I would go back. I would buy a condominium in Florida so I could drive up and down to Ohio and visit my parents, take care of them some.
Cool.
I did that for 2 years. And then on my trip back to Thailand for 6 months, COVID caught me. And I ended up basically stuck here for 2 years. And during that 2-year period, both my mother and my father died.
Wow, okay.
So now I have a decision to make whether I want to go back and live in the United States now that I am 70, like my friends, and need medical care. I have diabetes, glaucoma, and a few other things. So do I want to go back and live permanently in the United States, or sell my condo, or do I want to sell my condo and come back and live in Thailand? So yeah, and end of October, my Thai wife and I, we're gonna go back to the U.S. We're gonna spend 6 months deciding whether we want to stay there or come back to Thailand.
Okay, well, good luck with it all, Lateef, and thank you very much. And I will put some photos on the end, and one of your gorgeous wife, with your permission as well. And you know, thank you for the interview, and I hope everyone's enjoyed it. And let's go and have a few beers.
Hey, appreciate it. I want to get down and see you play before you leave too.
Wow, damn.
When are you going to?
Well, I'm
play
going
again?
I'm going on Thursday. I should have maybe sent you a message that I'm playing at. I played at the Moat House last Friday.
Oh, you were down at the Moat.
Yeah. Anyway.
Yeah. I wanted to hear you play.
Well, hopefully you'll get to do that soon, mate.
Are you called Rob
Rocks
on YouTube?
This channel is called Troubadour Tales, the one that this will be going on to, because I'm a troubadour, right? I go around and just play the tunes and that. Yeah, so
I just wonder if I could hear any of your music on YouTube.
Oh right, yeah. I mean, yeah, I have my other channel, which is Enigmatico, which it's got some of my original music on, like my song Mexico and a couple of other songs. So I'll definitely I can send you some links to that.
Okay.
So
yeah, I'd like to hear it.
okay, thanks.
Hey, I appreciate it. I enjoyed reviewing my life.
Okay, brilliant. Take care.
Yeah, take care. Thank you.
Cheers, guys. Bye bye. Cheers.